Asado ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma mritam gamaya, aviravir mayedhi, rudrayate takshanam mukham, tenamam pahi nityam. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness to light, lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through, O Lord, and protect us evermore with thy compassionate face. Om peace, peace, peace be unto all. The topic for this morning is building bridges. I was supposed to give this talk a couple of weeks ago, but it's equally appropriate today because this is the week after Ram Navami. I was going to give it right before Ram Navami. The connection, of course, is bridges. The Ramayana story is one of the great bridge stories that we have, building the bridge so that Sita could be rescued from Lanka. So I thought that I would give that talk this month. This is a talk actually that I prepared many, many years ago when I was still living in the Trabuco monastery. Some of you know that I have a fondness for building things and woodworking, and we had a fairly large bridge in the Trabuco at the very entrance with a small creek that ran underneath. And the time that I prepared this talk, the bridge had started to rot out, and we had a big project where we took the whole thing out and we really rebuilt the bridge. So a lot of what you're going to hear this morning is actually about building bridges, construction and everything. Some of you may also know that this big bridge building process that we went through at that time was mirrored a little bit in a very small, cute little Japanese bridge that we built on our property between one side and the other. And then very recently, an even smaller, without railings, kind of a walkway little bridge just over the gully to our new guest house. So this building bridges, I'm not an expert at it, but I learned quite a bit about how to build bridges, and it's really one of the great joys of my life, aside from spiritual life. This is a hobby, you could say, of woodworking. I remember, I believe it was Swami Shankaranandaji, if not him, Madhavanandaji, one of the two early presidents of our order. When he was speaking to the young monks, he told them that it's good to have a hobby. It was very unusual advice for one of the senior monks of our order. We expect them to tell us, dive deep into meditation and be one-pointed and don't let the mind wander, but he said it's good to have a hobby. And it's really been a great salvation for me in spiritual life to be able to sneak away and go into our little workshop and do the woodworking and everything. So I found that, of course I wasn't there to hear that, but I find it to be very good advice in spiritual life. To have something that we can divert our mind to, that it appeals to us and allows us to keep our mind fixed on a spiritual ideal at the same time, working with our hands and keeping the mind fixed on God. So I came upon this idea to give this talk about building bridges because there's so many symbolic angles to this. We talk about building bridges between individuals and communities and religions, and even between the individual and God. So it's a very nice way to look at this. So I want to go through some of the actual elements of bridge building and show how it has relevance to us in the practice of all of the different yogas that we have in spiritual life in general. So as I say, this bridge started to rot. It went over this creek bed, which is usually dry, but we had a stream that went sometimes. It was about 12 feet wide and 20 feet across. It was a big bridge. So I was just one of the workers in this project. There's several of us that worked together. We removed all the old rotted beams, and we had to beef up the foundation a little bit, and then you have to stretch the beams across, and then you build the planks, and then you put up a railing. So these were the different elements that we had to follow in building this bridge. So I want to go through some of the elements and the metaphors that we find and the symbolic meaning that we have, this building this bridge, this the connector, because we feel some separation. Now this is, we start spiritual life with this idea that we want to achieve some type of union with God, or lower self with a higher self, or even feel this oneness with others, and we need something to connect. We need a bridge to be able to transcend the gap that we feel. Afterwards, we'll understand that there's no real gap, but still, we have to have this process of going from this feeling of separation to this feeling of union, and then that understanding of oneness. So this idea of building the bridge, it works on all of these different angles, from the individual point of view, lower self to the higher self, from a devotional point of view, individual soul and God, and then this karma yogic point of view, to feel this oneness with everyone, and to be able to work that way. So I'm going to start with a few different axioms. These will be axioms with regard to bridge building and with regard to spiritual life. First one, a bridge is only as strong as the foundation that it is built on. So you have these beams that are going across, spanning this distance from one side to the other, but they have to rest on something. So even the small bridge that we made here on our property, we had to dig several inches deep, and we had to get some concrete, and we had to pour and let it set, and became hard and firm, and that became the foundation that then we could spread the beams across that. Now, one interesting thing about cement and concrete is that it keeps hardening. Some people would ask, well, when is it cured? When does it become hard? And the real answer is that even after 100 years, this process of hardening continues very, very slowly. After a few hours, of course, it'll be mostly hard, but it'll get stronger and stronger. So the foundation in spiritual life, if once we get really grounded in the foundational aspect of spiritual life, and we follow that, we find that it becomes stronger and stronger. So in spiritual life, we have the foundational aspect in yoga. We have yoga and Vedanta both. We have our Shama and Dhamma and yamas and niyamas. These are the essential elements, what we can call ethical and moral principles that we have to have. If we enter into spiritual life without being grounded in some type of ethical behavior, some type of self-control, then we'll make a mess of things. The reason why they're called prerequisites is that these things don't get cured by the practice of yoga and meditation. Sometimes, to a certain extent, perhaps, but otherwise meditation can magnify things. If we start out without this purity of heart, and then what will it be the ideas that come into our mind at the time of meditation? So there has to be a minimum amount. We know this idea of adhikari in the different yogas is a little bit different. For jnana yoga, the prerequisites are very strict. We have to have tremendous longing for self-realization and tremendous self-control and dispassion. In the path of Bhakti Yoga, it's not so strict. We have to be sincere. We have to have some genuine longing to have some type of experience of God. We don't have to be very learned in the scriptures or anything like that. So the different types, but the yama and niyama, these things are really very essential. We all know these. I won't spend too much time on these things, but non-injury. So the first thing is that we have to have some fellow feeling. We have to some idea that we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It doesn't simply mean not killing. Even we don't want to hurt other people's feelings. We want to have that fellow feeling. We don't want to do anything either by word or by deed or by thought, even harming anybody else. So this is the first one, ahimsa. Then truthfulness. These are all very big topics. That truthfulness doesn't simply mean not telling lies. We have to be genuine. We have to be authentic people. We have to be true to ourselves. And it takes a lot of introspection. I sometimes think that if we're very strict about truthfulness, then we won't even be able to say anything that implies identification with the lower self. Anything that gives the impression that I am this body, this is a falsehood, if I speak in those terms. So very high level of truthfulness. Of course, there are exceptions. If it involves saving somebody from danger, telling a little white lie, there are times when these things can be done. But in general, we have to practice truthfulness. Sri Ramakrishna said that in the Kali Yuga, this is one of the main types of austerities. This is the tapasya of the Kali Yuga. If we can practice perfect truthfulness for 12 years, we can realize God. Then, non-stealing, this means not being greedy, not wanting to take things that don't belong to us. These also have very high meanings. This idea that nothing belongs to us. Not considering anything as my own personal property. Very high levels of meaning for all of these things. Then brahmacharya, continence, purity of heart. For the monk, it means very strict continence. For the householder, it means faithfulness within the marriage. And a type of not being a slave to one's passions, moderation in life. The non-acceptance of gifts, aparigraha. This also doesn't have to be taken so literally. It means that we want to be independent. We don't want to rely on other people. Now monks, this is a very difficult thing for monks. That we beg our food. We live off of the hard work of other people. We can't help it. This is, we don't earn money ourselves, so we're not practicing it that way, but we don't look and don't behave in a certain way towards anybody so that they'll want to give us something. And we don't have any attachment to it. We may have a great sense of appreciation and gratitude. I know many of our monks that you give them a gift, and they'll make sure that at least once they'll wear it or they'll use it, even if they give it away and they don't need it. And they'll remember who gave them what with a sense of gratitude if it's given in love. There's an element that people talk about if these things are given with some desire behind it, then the person who receives it has to suffer from that, and we take on some of the karma. These are not things for ordinary people to worry about. There's a high level of spirituality, and those who have that level of spirituality, they're ready to digest any of this bad karma anyhow. Okay, so these are the yamas. Then the niyamas, cleanliness, shaucha, we want to be clean in body and also in heart. So this has to do with our character also. Santosha, contentment. We want to be able to get by with very little, to not have a lot of needs, to be able to live a very simple type of life, and not care for material things very much, not worrying about keeping up with other people, acquiring wealth, high position, anything. Whatever comes, it comes. Yadricha labha samtushtaha. We have the beautiful phrase from the Gita that we're content with whatever comes of its own. We put forth the effort, and then we see what comes, it's okay. If it doesn't come, it's also okay. Then austerity, leading a life of simplicity. We have to do some regular study, scriptures, spiritual reading, and finally self-surrender. That we have to recognize that this little ego is not everything, that there's a higher power behind us, and that not everything is under our control. So this self-surrender and acceptance, this is preliminary and also one of the final stages in spiritual life, both. This, if we take this to mean Sharanagati, then it's a very final stage, that we've freely admit our helplessness and just seek refuge with God, or renounce all effort, even at that highest stage. And this comes right before the highest type of realization. Now, these yamas and niyamas, we shouldn't feel that these are exhaustive lists, that there couldn't be other types of things added. We can add all of our own ideas to this, that we have to practice selflessness, respect for others, a spirit of sacrifice. We can, of course, fit these into the others, but whatever we feel to be a standard of morality and ethics, that we have to try to follow those things and understand that we can't be hypocrites. We can't have any progress in spiritual life if, on the one hand, we have all these selfish desires, we don't care about other people, and on the other hand, we're saying, "Oh Lord, I care for thee alone." These things, they won't work. So this is the foundation. We have to have a very strong foundation. Then we can lay the beam across. Now, both in our little bridge here and this big bridge that we built in Trabuco, we use something called Glulam Beam. Now, this Glulam Beam, lam, it means laminated. It means different thinner pieces of wood are glued together to make one beam. The old method in the old bridge that we had was one huge solid beam. I don't remember what it was, 4 by 12, something like that. It was a big, huge solid beam. But the theory later was that if you glue these 4 thinner beams together, then it'll be even stronger. And if you want to make a curve, our little Japanese bridge here, if you look carefully, it has a little curve on it. You can take one big beam, it's too thick to bend. It can't be bent. But if you cut it into small pieces so that it can bend it a little bit, and then you glue them all together as they're bent, and you clamp it, and then when you take the clamp off and the glue is dried, it stays in that form, and it has a little give to it, a little flex to it. This plain beam doesn't have any flex to it that way. So in building bridges or in any type of construction, very often you'll see, if it's curved or just a long beam, that it's actually individual smaller ones that are glued together. So these are called glulam, laminated beams with glue. Now, the same thing in spiritual life. We have the solid beam method. That means we choose one of the different yogas. Okay? So we say, I'm a Raja Yogi, or I'm a Jnani, and we follow that path. Now, with this single beam method, if there's any place where there's a weakness in it, say there's a little knot hole or there's a little crack or something like that, the entire beam loses its strength. If you glue them all together, then it doesn't matter. You can have one little place that's weak on one, and it's more than compensated for by all of the others. So in spiritual life, if we follow the Glulam Beam method, we don't choose one of the yogas exclusively. Now, we may have some special predilection for one of the 4 yogas. That's fine. We may be more devotional in nature, or we may be more philosophical in nature, or more active, or more meditative. That's fine. But if we can combine the others, then we find that there's a tremendous strength that comes from it. So we have our Jnana Yoga. There are people who just are very philosophical. They may not have much of a belief in personal God. This is a great savior for many people in spiritual life. Many people come to Vedanta because this idea of the personal God in the religion that they grew up in didn't appeal to them. It didn't seem very rational, that God is somewhere in heaven and looking down and deciding this and that. It sounded a little bit like just some type of nice stories that children are told. So for people like that, we have this Jnana Yoga, and perhaps, so not much interest in this personal God. Perhaps they're not much interested in saving the world. They're not karma yogis that way. So they don't have the devotion, they don't have the karma yoga, and they have very active minds. Maybe they're not very good at meditating, but they can think deeply. So this Jnana Yoga, this can be their main path. Then we have our Bhakti Yoga for those who have this natural feeling of wanting to surrender to God. Some people are born with this. I find it very interesting how some people struggle so much with this idea of a personal God, and other people, they'll never question it. Maybe they grew up with that tradition, I don't know exactly, or just some samskaras, whatever it is, but they want to taste this bliss of God. They don't even care for oneness, this idea. So for people like that, they'll like this idea of the main beam will be bhakti. And then Raja Yoga, we have people who don't need to even believe in this idea of oneness. They don't need a personal God. They have this idea that, yes, let me make the mind quiet. Let me make the mind perfectly still and realize, who am I? I don't care about God. I don't care about devotion or anything. I want to know the nature of the self. Who is this real jiva, this real paramatma? What is that? And then karma yoga. We have many people who are just active, and they care deeply about the world, about helping other people, very good, unselfish people. So their one beam method will be karma yoga. But we find that there's a fault line for all of them. There's a little crack, potential crack for all of them. And with this Glulam Beam method, this is the compensation that we have. So I look upon this as this combination of the four yogas. This beam that we have, which helps us go from one side of the bridge to the other side. This Glulam Beam is more efficient, it's lighter, it has a little flex to it, so there's less chance that it can snap and break. And as I say, if there are any little splits or cracks or knot holes in any of the four, we'll have the other three that will compensate for that. So it's a very, very strong. This was actually Swamiji's teaching. Swamiji wanted us to be equally adept at all of the four yogas. We can still have a special leaning towards one, but at different times also. The time of work, we have to be karma yogis. When at the time of worship, we have to learn self-surrender. When we're doing our study, we should think very deeply, and when we meditate, we forget that the world exists completely, and just turn deep within and try to have that highest type of realization. What are these little fault lines that we're saved from when we have this Glulam method? For the jnani, there's a danger of dryness. There's spiritual dryness, always analyzing, always trying to say, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the senses, all of that. It can become a little dry. And then what do we do the rest of the day? Whole day we have to just ask ourselves, who am I? Who am I? Or practice this mindfulness. I'm the witness, and watch. Some people can do it, of course. But a little devotion will take care of the dryness that can come from Jnana Yoga. Meditation. Meditation, on some level, leads a little bit to isolation and selfishness. We're caring only for our own realization, not thinking of others. Let me dive deep within. You remember a very interesting incident when the Keshav, who was inspired by seeing Sri Ramakrishna there, normally he wouldn't say these things, but he said, let us dive deep in the ocean of Satchidananda and drown ourselves there. So then Thakur teased him a little bit. At that time, there was a screen. The men were on one side, the women are on the other. He said, what about them? You dive deep in the ocean of Satchidananda, who will support them and look after them? He was teasing them. And he said, Keshav, dive and come back up, dive and come back up. So that means that also pay attention to the world, that you have your duties and obligations in the world. So a little bit of karma yoga can help us from the little selfishness and isolation that may come from Raja Yoga. Then the karma yogi, what is the danger there? Ego. That I'm doing so many good things, I'm helping so many people, I've raised so much money, that this ego comes in. This is why we need to practice a little meditation, and we have to practice a little bit of self-analysis. And if we can, we have to bring in this devotional idea that I am just an instrument in the hands of God, or I'm only doing this as a servant of God, and I'm doing it as an offering. So this will take care of that possibility that we end up just being good people and working for others, but a little sense of pride creeps in. So these are some of the advantages that take care of the pitfalls that may come when we try to practice any of these paths exclusively. The other thing, of course, is that different times of the day call for different yogas. I just made brief mention of that. And we have different moods at different times. Sometimes, what do? We wake up one morning and the devotion is dried up. We just don't feel inspired. We can read some devotional book, we can have holy company. There's so many different options are open to us. We can't meditate, so what do? We pray, we listen to a talk, we do some puja, we sing some devotional songs. So we have all of these different things that we can turn to if we're not in the proper frame of mood that time, or we simply don't have access. That there's no way for me to just sit down and meditate now that I'm in the middle of my work. What do? How do I spiritualize that? If we just do one of the yogas without the others, then a day is a little bit separated into spiritual and non-spiritual, sacred and secular. So the Karma Yoga and the Bhakti Yoga, these allow us to have a mood throughout the day. The Jnana Yoga, of course, we try to keep that in mind. This Raja Yoga, we try to keep a meditative mood throughout the day, but we can't meditate for 24 hours straight. So this is that Glulam method. So now we have our two axioms. The first, we need the foundation, and then we need these strong beams to go across. Now we don't walk across these beams. Now we have planks that go across side by side. Now we have the beams are also a type of foundation. So the third axiom, unless the planks are strong and securely fastened to the beams, we won't be able to cross. So otherwise it's like a tightrope, because these beams are maybe 4 inches wide on a larger bridge, or just 2 inches wide. So we don't walk across the beam. The beam is meant to support the planks that go across. So we have to stretch them across and connect them. We have to nail down or screw down the planks to the beam so we can cross to the other side. So if the 4 yogas are the beams, then these planks that go across, these will be the different virtues that we have: patience, spiritual longing, zeal, forbearance, faith, dispassion, conviction, love, all of these different things. These are what allow us to actually walk across or drive across the bridge. The beams are not enough. We need these planks to go across. So we have to have all of these other spiritual virtues that we can follow. Now, we have a fourth axiom. When you go across a bridge, what keeps us from losing our way and falling off the side? Railings. So we erect railings. Our little bridge here, you'll see nice little curved railings there. So this is what keeps us from losing our way, that we have to have some protection on the side, and this will help us cross from one side to the other. It's something to hold on to. So what exactly will be these railings? That one will be holy company. One will be the having a spiritual guide in life. All of these other things we can learn from books, we can do on our own, but we can lose our way a little bit. So in this spiritual journey, we have to know why we're trying to go from one side of the bridge to the other, and we have to realize that we need help. We need something to hold on to there. And one thing, of course, we have to understand: what is the nature of this spiritual journey? And what are we crossing over? What is the stream also? So the stream will be this worldliness, worldly existence, worldly life. We're trying to cross over that, our own lower nature, our own passions, our own desires, this tamas and rajas that we have, this transcend this laziness and indolence and little darkness that we have sometimes, or this the restlessness, this rajas. Sometimes the stream is strong and rushing. There's a tremendous rajas to that, so we have to cross over that. Sometimes it's just murky and dark and stagnant waters, the tamas. We have to cross over that. It's nice when it's a murmuring brook, when it's very sattvic, then it's easier to cross over. But still, even the sattvic element, we have to go beyond that. So even that, this is one of the three gunas. In Thakur's story, he says that even sattva is one of the robbers. But this is the robber that comes back and unties us and says, this is the way out of the forest. So even that has to be transcended, because that robber also can't go with us. In Thakur's story, the person who says, oh, you untied me, you saved me, come to my village, they'll be so happy to meet you. He said, no, I'm also one of the robbers. They'll also throw me in jail. You have to go beyond me and leave me back behind. So we have our foundation, we have the beams that go across, we have the planks that transverse that, then we have the railings there. And once we've been able to cross from one side to the other, then we can go back to this other idea that the bridge is also a bridge between ourselves and others. So once we've gone from one side to the other, that means that we've realized the true nature of the self. That we realize that, yes, this lower self, this is also part of that higher self. It also has that same divinity, like the lower bird, finally realizing that the higher bird, he and the higher bird are one and the same. So when we cross to the other side, then we also transcend this other idea, this separation between ourselves and other people. This is also the bridge that we use to go from one side to the other, that now we're getting rid of that gap that we have. The first gap is between lower self and higher self, or myself and God dwelling within. We cross that bridge. Then the other is this distance that we feel between ourselves and others. This is also a gap that we transcend when we can cross over. So this is the second bridge metaphor, and it follows from the first. Once we've completed this connection between lower self and higher self, then we can also complete that connection between ourselves and others. And it's not that we have to be fully enlightened beings, but the more we understand the nature of ourselves, the more we understand our connection with other people and our oneness with other people. So we just have to recognize the fact that our feeling of separation is false. The feeling of separation is based on external things. This is enough. God-realized souls. So once we've built this bridge and connected ourselves to others, then we see others as subjects and not as objects. One of the problems in life, not just spiritual life, in life is that we treat other people as objects, not recognizing, forget about their divinity, not even recognizing their subjectivity. These are people that, just like ourselves, are looking out in the world and experiencing things with their feelings and with their hopes and aspirations and highs and lows and all of these different things. This was Holy Mother's great teaching, that no one is a stranger, everyone is our own, that we have to feel this oneness with others. This is how we build relationships, so it's also a bridge between ourselves and other people. When we recognize that same divinity, or at least that same consciousness, that same awareness, that these are living beings who are experiencing the world the same way that we are. So then we have this whole network of bridges that connects us with others. Otherwise we're isolated. We're like little islands. There's a tremendous problem in modern day life, isolation, that we don't feel the connection with other people. So we build this bridge with other people, which actually is already there. that this is the same self dwelling within all beings, but we have to build this bridge to connect it so that we can understand it. Now, I want to get to another bridge metaphor, which is the real reason why I chose this topic, and that, of course, is the famous Ramayana story, where we have the whole allegory of building a bridge from the tip of India to Sri Lanka, so that Rama can go and be united with Sita, save her and be united with her. It's a very wonderful story. And most of you, of course, know this story, but I'll go through it a little bit. It starts out with King Dasharata of Ayodhya. So he's there in the north. He has 3 wives, Kaushalya, Kaikeyi, and Sumitra. And they had no children. So, of course, for a king to have no children, there's no one not just to pass his name along to, but for the future kingdom. So he performed different sacrifices for the birth of a son to rule the kingdom, and huge big things, large sacrificial fires and guests and everything. And out of the fire arose some divine being with a container of potion, and each of the wives drank from the container. This is the story. Most of you know it better than I do, so be patient with me. Then later, Rama had 4 sons from Kaushalya. The king Dasharata had 4 sons. From Kaushalya was Rama, from Kaikeyi, Bharata, and from Sumitra, the twins Lakshmana and Shatrughna. Okay, so this is the basic Ramayana story, and they were all trained in all aspects of princely life up until the age of 16. Then, at that time, there was a great ascetic by the name of Vishwamitra, and he approached Dasharata, the king, with a request that a demon was sent by the evil Ravana. Ravana, of course, is in Sri Lanka, who had been disturbing his hermitage. He was blowing out their sacred fire, stealing their offerings, disturbing their meditation, and Rama was the most valiant of all of the 4 brothers, and Lakshmana was also his faithful companion. So they went and they drove away the demons. So already Ravana is not very happy with Rama and his brother. Then the brothers were sent with the sage to Mithila, where King Janaka was performing a ceremony. They were looking for a husband for Sita. So this is the whole story about the marriage of Rama and Sita, and there was a test. There was a bow that was so strong that no one could string it. You had to be able to bend it and put the string there, and probably Janaka didn't want anybody to marry his daughter, so he made it so strong that nobody could do it, but of course Rama could easily do it. So then he had no choice but to give his daughter Sita in marriage to Rama, then he returned to the kingdom. Now, Dasharata felt that it was time to retire, and Rama was the eldest son, so he would make him the king. There was a wicked maidservant who aroused jealousy in the queen Kaikeyi, and wanted her son Bharata. So she wanted Bharata to be installed as king and not Rama. So it was jealousy. What do we expect? 3 wives, with all the different sons. So naturally each one wanted but she was the really jealous one. So she demanded, and she remembered that King Dasharata had at one time offered her 2 boons. So now she thought, I'll cash in on all of this. So she demanded that Bharata be made king, number 1, and 2, that Rama be exiled to the forest and wander through the forest for 14 years before he could come back. A little bit similar to the Mahabharata story. They were also exiled for 12 years and then another year, something like that. So Dasharata was dumbfounded, but Rama was a good son. He said, you gave your word, so it's okay. I'll honor that. And he gladly left the forest with his wife, Sita, and his faithful brother, Lakshmana. So they all went off. They traveled to the south. Then, one day, the sister of Ravana met them. and filthy in rags and looked like a demon, and wanted Rama and then Lakshmana to marry her. And when refused, told Ravana, who vowed revenge. So this was another run-in that they had. So already Ravana is not happy with Rama. Huh? What was the first one? Blowing out their sacred fires. Okay. Demons. Okay. Did I talk about that? Huh? I did. Okay. So Ravana and his uncle, they hit upon a plan that his uncle took the form of a golden deer. We all know the story. Came to the compound, and Sita was enchanted by it and wanted Rama to catch it. And so it drew Rama out of the compound, this little area there, and Rama realized it was really a demon and shot it. And it let out a cry, but in the voice of Rama. So when Sita heard it, she thought it was Rama's voice. Lakshmana came running, and Sita was captured by Ravana. Okay, so this is the main story. Rama and Lakshmana went in search of Sita, and they came across the kingdom of monkeys, and we have our Hanuman and all of the others. And when he heard this story, he became greatly devoted to Rama and vowed to help. And he told Rama that he saw that Ravana had swept off Sita in a flying chariot to the island of Lanka. So Hanuman himself leapt across. The Thakur mentions this so many times, that through his tremendous devotion and faith, he could simply leap across. Everyone else had to build a bridge. So he leapt across, and he found Sita weeping under a tree and captive to Ravana, and he told her that Rama would come and would rescue her. So now we know the story. There was no way to cross for ordinary people except to build a bridge. And I'm told that from satellites and photographs that they'd taken, they kind of see where perhaps a bridge had one time been built connecting the mainland India to Sri Lanka. Anyhow, the story is that Rama beseeched Samudra. Samudra is the god of the ocean for several days. And finally, Samudra appeared, and he said, "Why do you trouble me? What do you want? Why do you want to pass over me?" And Rama said, for love of Sita. Then Samudra told him that one of the monkeys had the ability to cause rocks to float on the water. So the Nala was sent. Nala was the monkey architect. He designed this bridge. He had all the monkeys collect stones and to make the tools and do all of these things. Everyone did something, even the chipmunks. There's a nice story. These squirrels or chipmunks, whatever they are, they would roll on the dirt and the dust, and then we'd go to the bridge and shake. And the dirt would come off out of their fur and would fill in the little gaps to make this bridge. And they say that, I think this is part of the story, that Rama was so pleased with them that he stroked the back. And now, so you'll see the three lines with the chipmunk there from the stroke of Rama. So this enabled Rama, of course, and the army of monkeys to cross over to Lanka and defeat Ravana and captured Sita. So this is one of the great themes, of course, in Indian devotional literature. This Mahabharata and this Ramayana, the two great epic poems of India. And really, this is the heart and soul of India, these two, more than the Upanishads or anything else. These are the stories that children learn sitting on the laps of their mothers when they're young, these wonderful stories. So the great theme, this pain of separation between Sita and Rama, is this longing for realization with God. These are all symbolic things. But this building of the bridge, this is also, we have to have this connection. How do we connect ourselves? Even, we may say there's oneness, but this sense of separation is there. So we have to connect ourselves by this bridge. And what is the meaning of yoga? Yoga is a bridge. Yoga is the way we unite one side with the other. So this yearning for union with the beloved, this itself is the bridge. This, of course, is the art of Bhakti Yoga. And that intense yearning itself This is also the cause. This is the yoga. Yoga is uniting, is spanning from one side to the other. So this is the beautiful image of the bridge. Okay, so this is my little treatise on building bridges. I think it's very nice at this time of year. We just celebrated Ram Navami. We did it last Sunday. I think Wednesday was the actual day. This was the 24th anniversary of the founding of our center. Our center was founded on Ram Navami Day. Another very interesting thing, the very first meeting that we had, kind of general meeting, was on May 1st, 1997, which was exactly 100 years after the founding of the Ramakrishna mission. When Swamiji held a meeting, I believe at Balaram Bose's house, and they laid down the rules for it and began the Ramakrishna Mutt and Ramakrishna mission at that time. So, this is my little talk on building bridges. If you ever go to Trabuco, you'll see, of course, it's been knocked down and rebuilt a couple of times, but a very nice little bridge there. We have our little bridge here from one side of the property to the other, and just a little walking bridge, the latest one that we did, that will take us from our property to the new guest house that we have. So this is my little talk on building bridges. So this building bridges, the whole concept is very nice, that we feel separation. We need some way to connect. And we build the bridges between ourselves and others, between our community and other communities. And this enables us to feel that oneness, which is the truth. From one point of view, we don't have to build any bridge because His oneness is the truth. But from the practical point of view, we don't realize that. So we need something to span one side to the other to connect us with others. And these yogas are the way that we do it. Okay, then I'll close by reading one of the very nice lines that we have in the Ramnam that we do every month. Nanyas priha raghuvate hridaya smadiye satyam vadami cha bhavan ankilataratma bhaktim prayachya raghu pangava nirbharame kamadi dosha rahitam kuru manasam me. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. O Rama, O inner self of all beings, I speak the truth when I say that I harbor no desire in my heart other than this. Free my heart from the stain of passion and grant me unshakable devotion to Thee. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto all.